Welcome to Satsang. And such a beautiful welcome also to our family joining us from so many cities and so many countries around the world. We feel you with us. Why is it so hard? These are questions that come into us in advance from our global family around the world, and then we'll open it up to any questions that any of you have. Why is it so hard to choose things that are good and healthy? Why do we crave the exact opposite? So the nature of the mind, the nature of temptation, the nature of desires, a lot of it has to do with our conditioning. And so, for example, everybody loves sweets. Now, on the one hand, some of it is just seems universal and almost innate. Doesn't matter where you are. Choti si beche, chocolate, and kids go crazy. Doesn't matter where they are, rich, poor, the east, the west, the north, the south. Piece of candy, piece of chocolate is what kids want everywhere. But that's just something they like. They're not walking through the world thinking, God, when am I going to get a chocolate? When am I going to get a chocolate? I wish I could have a chocolate now. This was a bad day. I didn't have a chocolate. They just happen to like it. It becomes a problem and a craving when, wherever we are, we're unable to be enjoying and loving that moment because we're wanting something else. And then you ask, well, why do we tend to crave things that are not good for us? It tends to come from our conditioning, both in our families when we were young, as well as from our culture. So for example, think about if you have children or grandchildren. When the kids do something really good, maybe they get an A on the exam, or they clean up their room, or they do all their chores, or they eat all their dinner. The things that we want them to do, they do it. How do we reward them? Sweets, right? Cookies, cake, ice cream. And so the sweets, which were naturally anyway something they liked, become a symbol of love. When we want to show a young child that we love them, we give them sweets, toffees, chocolate, cookies, ice cream, whatever it may be. So as we grow, something very interesting happens, which is we identify sweets with love. And when we're craving love, what do people tend to do? Buy a chocolate cake and eat the whole thing. Eat a pint of ice cream, right? Not just a spoonful, not just a scoop, not just something to enjoy in the moment, but we end up eating way too much because what we're looking for is not actually just a sweet. We're looking for love. We've associated that dessert with love. So that's one of the reasons that the craving is there. We're not just craving sugar, we're craving love. And so if you find that happening, you find yourself looking for love in cookies and ice cream, acknowledge what you're really looking for. Because obviously a pint of ice cream is not giving you what you really want anyway. At the end of it, you just have a stomachache. You certainly don't feel any more love. Acknowledge what you're really craving, which is not the sugar. You're craving what the sugar symbolized. And then try to find that. How can you actually experience love instead of a stomachache? Give love. Serve. Go read in a nursery school. Spend time with kids. Spend time with others. Whatever your way of finding that may be. There's so many ways in the world to actually fill ourselves with love. The other reason that we tend to crave things that are not so good for us is it actually is what marketing and advertisement tends to sell us. There's not a lot of people or companies making a lot of money on carrots or spinach. I mean, there are. It's not that there aren't vegetable growers and people who make a living doing that. But they're not making nearly as much as Nestle is making, or Cadbury is making, or, the companies that make things that are not good for us, or as cigarette companies are making. So the advertising by these massive companies, whether it's sugar sodas, whether it's chocolate and other dessert foods, whether it's cigarettes, whatever it may be, one of the reasons we crave them is that we've spent so many years of our life getting indoctrinated by billboards, by advertisements, commercials, showing. It's an advertisement for cigarettes, let's say. Well, they don't show somebody in a hospital bed hooked up to a ventilator, still needing a nicotine patch because they really want a cigarette, but they can't smoke because they're on a ventilator. That's not very romantic. It's probably not going to sell a lot of cigarettes. So instead, they show very, beautiful people, young, looking great, smiling, and maybe they're at some beautiful party. Maybe they're sitting on the beach together as the sun goes down. But what they always are is very happy, very peaceful, very free, really enjoying the moment. They're beautiful. Now, what we learn is, I'm not feeling so happy today. Maybe I should take up smoking. Now, it's ridiculous when you think about it like that. But actually, that is how we get indoctrinated. That's the whole science of marketing and advertising. Is by making people think that through the cigarettes, through the ice cream, through the chocolate, that they are actually going to find happiness that they're looking for, right? Or it's a commercial of, a very, very happy person, and she's walking down the street, she's skipping, she's dancing, of course she's gorgeous, wearing, beautiful, expensive, fashionable clothing. And she's got, a Snickers bar in her hands, and she's halfway through a bite into the Snickers bar as she kind of leaps into the sky. So if your day is feeling a little bit dry and boring, where does the mind go? I should have a Snickers. And instead, you end up eating the Snickers, sitting in the same boring and dry place, Now you're bored and you have a stomach ache. So it doesn't serve us, but this is where desire comes from. And so dealing with craving, it's especially where craving comes from, is we've been so indoctrinated to believe that something we really want lies in something else. And so it's important to A, look at it, understand it. What is the core craving? Well, we're all craving joy. We're craving peace. We're craving meaning in our life. We're craving connection. We're craving love. This is the core needs that we are looking for. Instead of thinking that cigarettes or Snickers bars are going to bring them to you, actually work to find the divine connection to the divine, to yourself. Find meaning in your life. Whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. You could be a mail clerk, a sweeper, it's irrelevant. Find meaning in your every minute and every moment. What you bring to that moment, what you bring to the people around you, what you bring to that situation, what you bring to planet Earth. And find love. Again, it doesn't have to be romantic love. We know that so frequently with romantic love anyway, it ends up leading to so much frustration and heartache anyway. Not saying it can't be very beautiful. Of course it can be beautiful. But if you look at the sages and the rishis and the saints and the prophets and the enlightened beings of so many different religious traditions in the world, in many, many cases, they were monastics. Now I mention that not to say you should go the other way. Not to say you have to become celibate or monastic to find it. But just to point out that wherever your path is to find love, there's no path that's better than others. If your path is to walk a householder life, beautiful. Find that loving connection in the spouse, in the children, in the family. And if that's not your dharma, don't worry. Because there's a whole beautiful spiritual history of people in divine ecstasy, in love with God, in love with creation, in love with everyone, in love with nature. And one of the most beautiful ways to find that love is in service, helping others. Connect with them. Maybe you're working in a soup kitchen. Maybe you're making sandwiches for the hungry. Maybe you're distributing blankets to homeless people. Maybe you're, reading in a school or volunteering in a state-run children's hospital or whatever you may be doing. But if you're finding that you're really, really full of cravings and longing, find some way to fulfill that longing in a way that's actually meaningful, rather than just a stomach ache from eating the wrong things, or lung cancer from smoking to be cool. And then the last piece about that is, there's a lot more pieces, but last piece for right now is start practices that make you realize you are not your craving. A lot of times we crave something, we want something, and so we just do it. Like we think, have to do it. One of my favorite stories about this is told by beautiful, wonderful mentor, guide who was talking about a friend of his who had a sugar problem, and especially a pastry problem. He loved pastries and had a major issue with pastries. And so every day on his way to work, he would get off the bus, buy a bag full of pastries, and then go to work. So he said to this other man, this beautiful mentor and teacher, he said, "You've got to help me. Like, I really want to go on a diet. I want to stop eating a whole bag of pastries every day. But I don't know what to do. Like, I don't even plan to go into the store. It just happens. One minute I'm getting off the bus. The next minute I'm sitting in my office with my mouth full of, powdered sugar and whatnot." And so this mentor and guide says to him, he says, "Well, have you tried leaving your wallet at home? Then you won't have any money to buy them." And the guy says to him, he says, "What?" He says, "You want me to steal them?" Now, I love that because the idea that I wouldn't buy the pastries is inconceivable. Either I have money and I'm going to pay for them, or if I leave my wallet at home, I'm going to have to steal them. But either way, I have to have them. Start to train yourself. Train yourself a little bit. If you're one of those people of, you've got to have a dessert with every meal, well, start having one, maybe 3 times a week. See, half the time, can you not have dessert? What happens? And even other cravings. Whatever the craving may be, see whether you can, even if it's not something that's bad for you, just to train the mind. Are you craving to check your Facebook? Don't. Not that you never can do it, but just don't this time. 50% of the time that the mind says, "I'm going to pick up my phone and scroll Instagram," just don't. Just to see. What's it like? What's it like not to give in to an instinct? And slowly, as you practice this, what you'll find is that the quality of your mind gets stronger and stronger. Because you realize, there's a craving, but I don't have to give in to it. When you're walking down the street and you're walking by a store and you look in, you want to buy something, 50% of the time, don't. If you still really want it, when you walk by it the next time, it can be one of the 50% of the time that you do buy it. So I'm not saying you never can buy it, but just don't now. There's a beautiful, very, very, very famous study called the Marshmallow Study that they did with little kids, where they took kids, I can't remember exactly how old they are, but they were toddlers, 2, 3 years old. And they gave them a choice. There was a plate with a marshmallow on it. They put the kids alone in a room. It was a one-way glass, so they could watch the kid, but the kid didn't know that they were being watched. And they said, "Okay, you have a choice. You can have this marshmallow now, or if you can wait," I forget how long it was. It wasn't very long. Maybe it was 10 minutes. It wasn't an hour. Maybe it was 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. Then you can have 2 marshmallows. And what they found was, decades later, the toddlers who could actually wait the 10 or 15 minutes for 2 marshmallows, who understood it is actually in my best interest to wait, ended up being so significantly more successful in their careers and their lives, happy, peaceful, like on every marker. Those kids were so much better off. Now, of course, at that time, it's just a quality of the mind. But But if at that young age they already have that quality that says, I can wait. I'm good. I don't need it. That it actually leads to a lifetime of success. So it's not too late, don't worry. If you were one of the toddlers who would have eaten the marshmallow right away, if you're still like that, don't worry. You can train yourself. Just 50% of the time that you want to do something, don't. See what happens. See how the brain and the mind change. And understand, I'm actually in control here. And then when your cravings arise, you've got a much stronger mental capacity to not give in to them. Are there any questions that anyone here may have? Yes.
It's related to atonement, prayaschitta. When while we going to take a sannyas, there is some means sanskara like that, sanchit karma or prarabdha or kriya. तो उनको तोड़ने के लिए we discuss the all this. There is one atonement mantra. So just I want to know about it.
So, when we take vows of sannyas, official vows of renunciation, there are practices of freeing oneself of karma, our long-term karma, our medium-term karma, our short-term karma. But it comes as part of a package deal. Because it comes when you do actually the cremation of yourself. So there's a ritual that when you take sannyas you do, a fire ceremony that is literally your own cremation, where the entire past being is burned, no longer exists. And of course, it's not just a ritual. You have to fully be prepared to live like that. And so the burning of karmas comes as part of a package of the burning of the entire being. A total renunciation. A lot of the karma is associated with a lot of aspects of our dharma. But that's why also, for example, you take people who were Brahmin, for example, and who have had the sacred thread ceremony. Well, then that's part of a very strong aspect of their dharma, you could say. But when you take sannyas, the sacred thread goes. It all goes. So even things that are, you could say, positive or spiritual or powerful or, beneficial on those levels, those also go. So it's that full package of you are no longer of any family, of any caste, of any heritage. You are just the being. So that's the full package, and obviously it's a very in-depth and intense package, and it's not something that comes just in a ritual or just in wearing certain clothes, but it's actually something that comes with a practice that continues to be a practice every day of letting go. Yes.
Back to the story which you were just saying. So when we don't give in to our cravings, what's the next step then?
Ah, great. Well, when we don't give in to our cravings, slowly we find that they disappear. There's a whole neural circuits and patterns in neurology and chemistry. I won't go into all of it here, but around issues of reward. Right? We know that we have specific neurotransmitters in our brain that pump into our brain as we get rewarded. Now, what we think is going to reward us varies. So for someone who smokes cigarettes and is addicted to cigarettes, put them on an 8-hour airplane where they can't smoke. They finally land. Okay, the airport is also non-smoking. Right? So the whole brain is going, oh my God, okay, 20 more minutes till I can smoke, 10 more minutes till I can smoke. And they're, the whole engine is going. When they finally sit on a bench, 20 feet out of the airport where they're allowed to actually smoke, they're not getting flooded only with the tobacco and the nicotine from the cigarette, but they're getting flooded with all sorts of reward hormones and pleasure hormones. Now, if you take someone who doesn't smoke and you make them smoke, they're going to cough, they're going to hack, it's going to hurt, it burns. They're not going to have reward hormones or pleasure hormones. So it's not dependent upon the thing itself. So much some is. You put a piece of beautiful milk chocolate in most people's mouths and the pleasure hormones and reward hormones are going to go for most people. But a huge percent of it has to do with not the thing itself, but the story we tell ourselves about it. And so the less you engage in it, the more you free yourself from that circuitry. Slowly, even addictions get broken. Addictions are, you could say, kind of the end of the spectrum of a craving. You could have a mild craving, then a medium craving, a strong craving. Then you're actually addicted. But even addictions can be broken. Cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, food, gambling, whatever it may be. We can free ourselves of addiction. So as you free yourself, as you don't give in to the craving, a whole new way of living emerges. That thing stops having power over you. And you develop new ways. So let's say, for example, that you've got a craving. Let's stay with the example of the pastries. Okay? So you've got a craving for pastries. Let's take this guy. Go back to the story. The guy who gets off the bus and he buys the pastries, craving for them. Well, if instead he could develop a conscious habit, get off the bus and start to feed the birds. Bring some bread from home in a bag. Get off the bus. There's always lots of pigeons right there, and start to feed bread to the pigeons. Or get off the bus and start to chant a mantra or recite a prayer. Okay, it's a 10-minute walk to my office. This is how many rounds of my mala I can do while I walk. This is how many times I can recite that prayer. Or get off the bus and become very mindful. Use the 10-minute walk to be fully mindfully engaged. Or use it to write poetry. Every day I'm going to write a poem in my mind, maybe only 2 lines. But by the time I get to my office, I'm going to have a poem. So in the beginning, you give yourself something else. The craving arises. What do you do instead? Because just sitting there and, having your fingernails going into your your hands. It works. Eventually you'll overcome it. But it's a lot easier if you can give yourself something instead. Something that's also enjoyable, something that also is going to give you a little bit of the pleasure and reward hormones. And then slowly, 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 that craving will disappear. And not only will the craving disappear, but your identification as the one who craves, as the one who's out of control, who doesn't have the ability to not give in, that also changes. And that's really powerful, because then you know, yeah, I am disciplined. I don't give in to my cravings. I have control over my mind. And then other habits, other cravings, other patterns, you find that you're able to break free of them as well. Because most of us have a lot more than just one craving or one bad habit. Take one. And what you find along the way as you free yourself from that is you develop the strength to free yourself of others. Because then suddenly you are the type of person who doesn't give in.
So again, the whole idea is to just free ourselves from the other.
The whole idea is to be free, period. Freedom is the highest goal of a spiritual path. Moksha, freedom, liberation. Freedom is the whole point. Freedom from the games of the mind. Freedom from the urges of the senses. Freedom from our identification. Freedom from our patterns of thought. Freedom from negativity. Freedom from habits. Why? Because as long as you're not free, you're stuck. And the whole point is to become free. And then, by all means, have chocolate cake. Enjoy. I mean, as long as you're not diabetic, who cares? Enjoy it. But enjoy it freely. Not because you were bored or depressed or you didn't know what to do or you had to drown your sorrows. But actually enjoy it. Okay? Sure. Yes.
Just now you told highest stage of spirituality is freedom. Suppose I achieve that freedom, what next step I have to do? Nothing to do for me.
Once you are free, once you have attained moksha, that is considered the highest level. Then what you do, your actions, are done in freedom. Most of us, what we do is because of the thoughts in our mind. We want something, we take it. We want to make a lot of money, so we have a job like that. We are craving chocolate cake, we go and buy it. Whatever it may be, what we think in our mind becomes what we do. We get angry, we slap someone. We have an urge, we give in to it. Once you are free in the mind, then your actions become in service rather than as stuckness. So that's the point. The freedom of who I am in my awareness, in my mind. Not stuck, not a slave to any of it. Then I get to use this beautiful life every minute and every moment as an instrument in God's hands. I get to enjoy fully the creation and serve it fully. That's Jiva Mukti, freedom while living. Have a beautiful rest of your evening and a beautiful morning and day to our family all over the world. And so much love to all of you. And looking so forward to seeing you tomorrow.